welcome. My name is Chris Cann with Harbour Insight, and with me I have Ben Pullinger, who is Chief Executive of ATEX Resources. ATEX is focused on its Valeriano copper project in northern Chile, and today Ben and I are going to have a conversation around Chile itself and also the copper market. Hi Ben.
Chris, great to be here.
Great to have you. Let's start with the copper market. A lot going on. There's tariffs, there's an ongoing tightness, there's an energy transition, there's a need to fuel the AI evolution. What's happening in the market from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just a lot of exciting things for copper right now. I think, if you look at like infrastructure spending, AI, the need for copper and electrification, the need to electrify, it all speaks to significantly higher copper prices where we are today, in a world in which there are just not a lot of new good discoveries, or and what we're typically seeing, especially in like kind of like the legacy assets in Chile, declining grades, declining production. I mean, if you look at Chile as a whole over the last year, I think it was only the Escondida expansion that kind of like propped up the market, with everything else kind of like starting to fall off. And I think big cliffs in production coming up in the next little while, and really just not that many compelling new projects that could be brought online in the next 10 years. And I think people miss this, is that the necessity of mining in the transition means that you need to be adding new mines. I think that to keep up with the forecast demand, like our friend Mr. Robert Friedland will say, you need an Escondida every 2 years, which is not going to happen. So there'll be a lot of money to be spent on brownfields expansions, but there's not a lot of quality new projects that demand to be put into production in this current cycle, and the copper price keeps on going up. So it's a very exciting time for us at Valeriano, and as we look forward to what we think is turning out to be one of those projects that should be built.
You're talking about declining production in Chile, obviously the copper capital of the world, and people missing that. I think people are missing it because production numbers out of Chile, I think, are going up, aren't they? How come numbers are going up? You talked about Escondida. What are the timeframes we're talking about here until we actually see maybe that dropping off?
I think it's happening right now. I think if you took a deeper dive at the numbers from last year, I think it was just the expansion of Escondida that actually masked the decline in most of, especially in Codelco's operations as well. So I think what we're seeing is there is a lot more expansion capital that needs to go into these projects. I mean, you look at El Teniente, it's been in production for 120 years. Chuquicamata has been in production forever as well. There's a bunch of these projects that have been in production for decades and decades that are either now transitioning to underground, in the case of Chuquicamata, or are starting to have to look for brownfields expansions or new discoveries, because they're getting long in the tooth. Yeah.
Those brownfields discoveries, or a lot of the reserves are actually sitting there and not being mined at the moment. How long are we looking? What kind of horizons are we talking? Given that we've got these demand scenarios around an energy transition, around AI, if the world sorts itself out in terms of geopolitics and underlying trade actually kicks in.
Yes.
Okay. But if that were to happen, all of a sudden you're going to need a lot. What kind of time horizons are we looking at before there's a real squeeze?
Well, I think if you look at what it's like, let's answer this way. If you look at what it takes to discover, define, and ultimately build a modern copper mine, especially on the scale of a Valeriano or the scale of one of these new giants, you need like 5 to 10 years of exploration, 5 to 10 years of definition and study and permitting. So it's it's a 10 to 20 year kind of window that you're looking at to go from the thought of something new to actually see it hit the market. And I don't think that's very well factored into the way that people think you can just go from driving a combustion engine today to driving a new GM electric vehicle down the highway tomorrow. And this is obviously what we're seeing play out in the kind of like pricing and stuff. Tariffs. I'm not an economic expert on this, and I'll stick to kind of the bigger picture themes here. You nailed it though, on political risk as well. Look at what we saw happen with in Panama, with Cobre Panama, which would be the next biggest new copper mines to come into production. So there's very few places in the world, declining reserve grades, declining production, Chile, obviously, by far the standout in terms of the places that you want to be where you can invest your capital, build your projects, and build these legacy assets, but not a lot of new mines going into production. I think over the last decade, we've seen QB2 and that spectacular project. And now we're starting to look, I think there's discussions about consolidating parts of that with Glencore and Collahuasi, right? So back to my other thoughts last time we chatted about copper becoming now more of a consortium or consolidation game, because you need to move these projects forward faster. You need to share balance sheet risk. You need to take the district view on this stuff. And this is why one of the reasons when I get up in the morning I get so excited about Valeriano. I look at El Encierro, I look at Antofagasta, I've got Codelco as my neighbors. We are very lucky to have Agnico Eagle, which is now the biggest gold mining company in the world by market cap, supporting us after they gave us $55 million last year. They're looking for legacy assets and belts where they can build significant presence, kind of like what they did in Canada, and I think that's what they see in Chile. But again, there's not a lot of these special projects that show up in a cycle, and I think Valeriano is definitely one of those and should be getting more and more attention as we continue to deliver the results that we've seen through phase 5 into phase 6 and beyond.
At another point, we've talked about the regional players, and we've talked about the role that Valeriano might play in some sort of collaborative effort to bring a number of these potentially large-scale deposits on stream. How do you see that playing out in terms of there are some very large neighbours that you have, which you've touched on. There are some smaller guys as well. There's plenty of action. You're in a link belt, which is between the porphyry superhighways, for context. So you're in a developing region. What does a consolidation play look like, and who leads that?
So I think the consolidation is generally usually driven by whoever's moving the fastest, and I think right now, so Codelco is drilling the El Torrente project, and we're not sure what's going on there. I wish them well, because it'd be great to have another discovery, but they're there for a reason. Antofagasta is committing to spending $100 million over 3 years, and they're busy permitting for the drill program for that at El Encierro. And by nature of us, we're a small junior, and that means we live, eat, breathe, dream about our project, and it's all that we focus on. So it just means we have the opportunity to be way more focused, way more intense, and through the utilization and the implementation of directional drilling with our partners, Recon Drilling, we've just really been able to put our foot down and accelerate exploration here. And I'd love to take credit for it as well, but it's just the project is spectacular. We are incredibly lucky to be custodians of what is turning into a national treasure for Chile. And this is the age of copper. This is the time to have these projects. And so again, right time, right place, right commodity, great neighbors. But we just, by virtue of our myopic focus on Valeriano, are just able to move ahead a lot faster. And through that, we're seeing new discoveries. We're seeing higher grade, kind of smaller optionality becoming part of the equation. And I think, again, when you look at districts like this, it all becomes a cash flow and economic decision. How much money are you going to put in? What's the size of the prize? Cost of the test? What is that going to get me? How much money do we need to put in? And how quickly can we get our money back, and then deploy that into something that's bigger? And right now, with the B2B breccia zone, with the 2% plus mineralization that we're hitting, that is that engine. And if we can find more of that, it becomes very compelling. And again, I think the government of Chile certainly sees it when they talk about water and infrastructure projects. They consistently have said over the last 2 years, we would like to see new projects. We want to not be an obstacle to permitting, but we don't want to see and be part of permitting infrastructure that only gets used by one project. So this is the perfect case study for it. Codelco finds something at Torrente, Antofagasta gets drilling and turns and does spectacular things at El Encierro. We continue to do spectacular things and find other porphyries and other breccias in the area at Valeriano. This gets very compelling on a consolidation basis.
So, presumably, given that we're in this link belt, we are in a emerging copper region of scale. Does that mean that you're facing a couple of different challenges and opportunities there, where there will likely to be support from the government, as you say, because they want to see the infrastructure built? But the fact that you're in essentially an emerging region, you're between these porphyry superhighways, that there is an infrastructure there maybe isn't the skill space and other supporting infrastructure that you would want to have if you're building the kind of copper project that you're talking about at Valeriano.
So I think there's a number of ways to tackle this. So I think let's kind of like start like one thing at a time. One, geography. Most important thing is, yes, this isn't a new emerging belt, and like it's about probably a decade behind Vicuña in terms of exploration maturity. You know, you've seen from like the original NGEX, the spin out of Jose Maria, to Fila del Sol, to like the Los Helados, and then the Lunahuasi discoveries. You know, multiple tens of millions of dollars in exploration spent every year for almost 2 decades. Like we're in our 4th year of drilling at Valeriano, and look what we've achieved. So I think, and another thing is we're 100% in Chile. So when we look up at I think Vicuña, we could happily say is kind of like our big brother right now. We look up at them, spectacular projects. Then we look at ourselves, and we're like 100% in Chile. Not very complicated metallurgy, like very easy, very straightforward. I think ultimately underground mines are just becoming better for a smaller footprint, use less water, and this lends itself, that topography and the style of mineralization here lends itself very well to underground mine. I think that's a great advantage. And then we'll go back to like the tale I told you about El Teniente. You don't have to be hiring people to go and work on the top of the mountain anymore. Obviously, once it's built and being operated, you can set up in Los Bronces is actually just doing this from Santiago, moving their operations center from Santiago to a more local community. You can invest in these local communities. And let's not forget, at the end of the day, that if you don't have the backing of the people in the area and the government, you aren't going to move these projects forward, because these are Chilean assets for Chilean people ultimately. We're very lucky to be the custodian of them and being able to shepherd and bring investment to this. But it means that we have a very big intricate network of stakeholders that we need to walk hand in hand with, and those are from our people, the people in communities. And one of the things I'm incredibly proud of that our team has started is what we call Prepper ATEX. It's where we go out into the community and we solicit people that want to be involved in this business, and offer them the opportunity to get trained to become a geological assistant, and we're evolving this into food handling and food manipulation and kind of all kinds of other things. But get involved at the project from this point at an exploration stage, so that the people in the communities grow with the project. We provide a credible source of ultimate employment. That, you know, if people want to know about what this is, we want to be part of the community, and we want the communities to be part of us.
You've talked about having those pieces in place. When I've asked about economic studies, etc., you are planning to build. These are all pieces of the puzzle that you are putting in place in preparation ultimately for permitting?
Look, I think it's just best practice is what we're trying to achieve right now. Like, you know, we want to be good neighbors. We want to be good partners. And one of the things that I'm really excited about is I know Starlink is a dirty word sometimes right now, but we put Starlink into these communities that are remote. There's no cell phone signal, and they don't have a lot of connectivity with the outside world, especially in our schools and clinics where you need high-speed communications these days. And one of the things that we've seen is actually the clinics and the nurses at the clinics developing their own telehealth networks to change the quality of life significantly for kids and elderly people, vulnerable people in these communities that didn't have access to specialist care and stuff, now can do it through telehealth. So we are investing a lot of money in the ground, but also we need to that the communities and the people around us that we touch need to feel that and be part of that as well, because that's just the best way to do this, is when everybody is aligned on why we're there, what this means, and where the benefit to Chile, to our workers, our employees, our team members, our shareholders, the communities, the people on the ground. When that all comes together and everyone is part of that bigger picture, that's when this works.
How do you set that up? We see a lot of juniors who don't have this kind of sophistication when it comes to their social or community programs. Being a good neighbour, best practice in general. I'm not saying that's right, but to do that as a junior, like you say, you have to invest.
Yep.
Have you invested in people? Have you got a budget? Is it a policy and a strategy you've outlined on what you're going to do? or is it more opportunistic, just being engaged, seeing what's required and acting appropriately?
It's very much horses for courses. Right? We every year we will continue to increase our spending on environmental studies, on social outreach and programs. We're rolling out new programs every year as the project moves forward. And I think when you look at our board, when you see the DNA that we have in our board, like Craig Nelson, our chairman, been involved in mining like for 50 years, has seen over 300 mines, has been involved in discoveries, large-scale discoveries that didn't go into production, but also large-scale discoveries that did go into production, and lessons he's learned. Alejandro Wood, on the board of Codelco and on the board of ATEX, ran CESCO for a long time, just an absolute legend in terms of what the copper market is and what copper means to Chile from an administration, government, social perspective. Jimmy Lee Cruz, who's the vice president for the technical director for joint ventures for Rio Tinto Aluminium in Brazil, spends a lot of time on permitting, on doing things right, on making sure that these big projects don't get themselves into trouble. So it's just in our DNA and our core that this is the way that you do things. I was very fortunate when I was working for Roxgold a long time ago in a different life to have the experience. We had 5,000 artisanal miners on top of the Yaramoko deposit, and by the time it came for us to put up the fence, we had just gone out and engaged with these guys and told them what was happening and let them know, and just open, transparent communication all the way through. And the remaining guys, I think over a couple of months, went from 5,000 people down to less than 200, and those guys got jobs building bricks and putting up fences. So there's always a better way to do things, and it's bringing the right people in. Felipe Pinheiro, who runs our ESG, I call him our Chief Social License Officer. Again, just a consummate professional, comes from the oil and gas industry in Chile, dealing with this stuff on scale, but just a very creative thinker in terms of it's an investment and it's a partnership. So it's not philanthropy, right? We want the communities to do better for us being there. We want to invest alongside them, but we don't believe in that, in kind of a paternalistic or condescending approach. That we want to be genuine long-term partners, and we want to have everybody, as many people as we can, aligned with us on this project.
From your experience, you mentioned Roxgold. Obviously, you were at Exelon, you're at Palangio. Yep. A lot of experience in different parts of the world, usually emerging economies. Has the attitude to sustainability, community engagement, ESG, to use those kind of all-encompassing terms, changed markedly in your experience over the past 10, 15 years?
So I would just, I think in general, mining is just getting better. The way that we think about partnerships, the way that we think about developing, the technology that's at our disposal for automation and to do things in a safer and better way, and then the real tangible benefit of partnering with communities and have everybody inside. This is just the better way to do it. And we, obviously we're not known historically for doing this very well. There's a lot of black eyes and stubbed toes on many projects that I genuinely feel that we are getting better. We are focusing way more time, and there's just a network of professionals now to support this that there wasn't 10, 15 years ago. And I think it all speaks to a brighter future for what we do, and doing it in as much as mining can be sustainable, in a much more sustainable, smaller footprint and gentle way.
That attitude, coupled with an enthusiastic approach from governments and from regulators, hopefully, because of the need for new projects, that hopefully speaks to an accelerated permitting process and getting Valeriano through those stages once it gets there. Is that wishful thinking, or are you kind of braced for the usual administrative headaches?
Look, I think when you're in a position that we are in, you always have to control what you can control, right? Like, we hear that the government is working on reducing permitting times. That would be great if that happens. Like, the government of Chile wants to double copper production. That'd be great. We want to be a part of that. But we know that these are things that you need to permit. So we're going to start putting a lot more attention onto understanding hydrology, understanding our potential impact on fauna and flora and communities and stuff, and make sure that all of that is moving along at the same time as exploration is. I think often is the case, and at least historically, is you don't always know how your project is going to manifest, and so where you're going to invest that capital from early on. basically from day one at Valeriano, we knew that this had the legs to get there. And so we were very fortunate that we could make these decisions to just commit to doing all this stuff from day one. And I think it makes it a lot easier that way. You don't always discover the deposit on your first and second drill hole. Start in the middle and work your way out. That's special. So I just think there's a lot of benefits that Valeriano has by nature of what a spectacular deposit is, by nature of how we've, like the exploration adventure has rolled out, that has put us in a very good position that we can continually make smart decisions early. And that's going to benefit, that's going to show that benefit down the road, when I think we're hoping we get to permitting down the road or with studies, de-risking it and talking to partners and having real meaningful partnerships like we do with Agnico.
All sounds great. And I believe you. I'm sure people are still going to be asking, because it is such a risk and because this is where things go wrong, they want to know about permitting. What does that landscape look like? You have put certain pieces of the puzzle in place as you go along, and you say you're fortunate to be able to commit to doing those pieces of work. What's the landscape look like in terms of timelines? When do you have to start actually spending significant capital in getting things ready for that process?
I think right now what I'd say is, like, well, again, talking to things, doing things right, that utilizing directional drilling, because in Chile, like, the amount of impact that you create at surface with your exploration is what dictates where you fit in the permitting process, right? And so using the same pad, using directional drilling, like not having to create new pads that like more than what was like it has been there since like 1997 when Barrick was exploring, just being able to reuse that obviously has been a huge benefit to the project. We are in the permitting process now over the next couple of years to permit for more than 40 drill pads. So once you get to 39 drill pads, you have to put out what's called a DIA, a Declaration of Environmental Impact, DEA in English, DIA in Spanish. And that would be to permit for pads beyond 39 to however we go. And that requires obviously fauna, flora, social studies, and all that kind of stuff. So we are starting to work on that. In terms of the actual permitting that it gets to mine, again, that is largely just doing like your proper baseline work, studying, like understanding what impact you could have, how that works out, and knowing enough about your project that you can make decisions about where infrastructure and stuff can go. We're starting to look at that stuff. We're still ways down the path. As I said, right now our priority is very much understand, do we have the heart and soul of this deposit? Do we have the high-grade engine that define? Do we know like what this project is? Because that obviously impacts what those eventual infrastructure placements and everything look like. But that doesn't mean there's not a lot of things we can't decouple from that as we work forward.
Ben, that's all we've got time for. Thanks for speaking with us.
No problem. Thanks, Chris.